Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Theology Thursdays. This is our fourth episode in this series, and you can find all of our previous episodes online at our YouTube page. Go ahead and just type East Hills Community Church into the search bar at YouTube and then hit subscribe, and you'll be notified anytime a video like this or something else that we do is uploaded. So today we're missing a couple of my behind the scenes workers, and so you might notice the quality is a little bit less than normal, and I might not be able to answer your immediate questions as quickly or be able to self-moderate those, but we still nonetheless have three questions that we're going to go through tonight. But before we get started, I know that this has been the summer schedule. And I know that in the fall or in autumn, schedules change. Specifically at East Hills, I know there are several life groups that meet on a Thursday night at 7. So if there's another time that works better for you, that you're interested in still tuning in live, then go ahead and leave it in the comments along with a question, and we'll see about shifting that time. That'll be a recurring announcement for the next 3 or 4 weeks until we actually switch times or keep what we're doing until Labor Day. But tonight we're getting started with a question. It starts out as a statement. It says, I disagree with someone theologically. Can I support them or believe them or trust them in other situations? Now, this question is a good one for those of you who just turned in. The question is, I disagree with someone theologically. Can I support them or believe them or trust them in other things? Now, it's kind of my non-answer for you. My quick non-answer for you is it depends. There are some situations in which, yeah, that's perfectly okay to trust them if you disagree with, for example, the way that they view the end times. Like, yeah, you could still trust them and believe them or study and read from them in other areas of theology or other Christian teaching. And certainly there are ramifications for every theological belief, but it might not actually affect what is being talked about at that moment. So if you disagree with someone theologically, it just depends whether or not the issue at stake or the thing that you disagree with them about is significant enough of an issue for it to color everything else that they're saying, so that you should just toss it out of the window. It's the question you really should be asking is it worth it? Or is it wise? And you will have a different response or a different answer to that question each time that you're dealing with a new person or a new idea. Let me put it this way. If you're thinking about reading a book and you read maybe one book a year, don't make it Rob Bell's new book. Yeah, sure, everybody's talking about it, and you want to see what everybody else is talking about, and you want to get in on the crazy dialogue and the heated debates, and you want to add fuel to the fire. But if you only read one book a year, that's not the book for you. If you only read one book a year, you should be reading something that you can trust 99% of it. The reality is we don't believe or trust everything or agree with on every issue with anybody. I like lots of theologians, and I'm sure that if we were in a coffee shop and we were talking back and forth, there would be lots that I would agree with, and then they would say something and I would be like, I don't really agree with that part of it. And yet there are plenty of other things. But let me say it again. If you are listening to sermons, if you're listening to sermons on your commute and you're deciding whether to listen to Stephen Furtick or to Tim Keller or to John Piper, and you agree with one of them more than the other, sure, go ahead and listen to one of those persons. Stephen Furtick may be on the edge according to some people, and John Piper may be on the opposite extreme according to some people, and Tim Keller might be considered somewhere in the middle. But if you are listening to sermons every day or a couple times a week on your commute, then go ahead and take from the buffet line of all of the good teaching that's available to you, because you're going to be better for it. But again, if you only go to church on a Sunday, you you better make sure that church or that preacher that you're listening to is one that you're going to trust more often than not. So the question is it worth it? Are they more dangerous, or are they more good than they are evil? There are even secular people. So again, if you read a couple books a year, maybe, or you listen to a couple of podcasts or watch a couple of documentaries a year, then make your choice wise. So should you read Rob Bell's book? Not if you're only going to read a couple of books. Should you read Neil deGrasse Tyson's Astrophysics for People in a Hurry? I mean, it's a short book. You could go for it. But if you're only going to read that perspective and you're not going to encourage your faith with other things that you can fully embrace, then just stay away. Just be wise. Be rational, and ask, is the reward worth it? Risk reward. Next question. What actually is the gospel? Now, the gospel is, depending on who you ask, the gospel will take on different character. It will have different images attached to it. It will look a certain way. So if you ask somebody, if you ask me, what is the gospel? My general response would be that God created everything to be good, and then humanity messed it up big time. And that God created a covenant with mankind to show his grace and love to them. And he promised that he would remake the entire earth and include you and me in it, in his church, that we would live forever, eternally with him and with one another. That's one perspective of the gospel. The gospel always will involve God. It will always involve a problem. It will always involve salvation. It will always involve a future. It will always involve the person of Jesus. But sometimes the details, depending on the person that you talk to, are a little bit nuanced, a little bit. When you read the Gospel of John, and then you go over and you read the Gospel according to Mark, and then you read the Gospel according to Luke, and then you read the Gospel according to Matthew, they all say very similar things, and yet they twist the diamond and they look at it from a different perspective, so that you can see the things that affected them most about Jesus's life and the way that he taught and the things that he did. And so for me, I like to focus on new creation. I imagine living in a new heaven and a new earth and being able to explore the wonders of all of creation. But somebody else, maybe they come from a dark or an oppressive background. And so they focus on Jesus liberating them out of the darkness. And so, yeah, that's true. That is gospel as well. It's not the metaphor. It's not the imagery that packs the most punch when I hear it. Yeah, it's great and it's good. And the Gospel of John talks about light coming into darkness and of rescuing us out of that. But again, it's perspective. So the gospel doesn't change, but the colors. You could think of it like the gospel is this giant coloring book of all of the same picture over and over and over again. And depending on who you talk to, it'll have different shading here and different shading there, and et cetera, et cetera. Some people say the gospel is only the death and resurrection of Jesus. Some people even limit it to the death of Jesus. You get into some problems if you focus only on such a small portion. Yes, Jesus did die for us, but he also was raised to life. But even more than both of those things, he also came in human flesh. You see, if you try to pin down the gospel to one easy to digest statement and hold that for the rest of your life and say, this is the gospel, anybody who defines the gospel as something different than this is a heathen, you're going to get into some tough spots. Because again, the gospel doesn't change, but the colors that are used, the words that are used to describe the majesty of what our infinite God has done on behalf of humanity, it's too big. Which is, again, why Theology Thursdays exist, to explore the depths of the gospel and to understand what our responsibility therefore is. Third question, how does faith get us into heaven? Now, this is kind of a funny question, because Like there's no real easy to describe answer. We live in an age of science where we need causation. We need A plus B equals C. And if A plus B equals C, then C minus B equals A. And we need exact mathematical terms to describe things. And when we get to things like faith, there aren't those strict mathematical terms. The funny thing is, science has vague terms that they use to describe things they don't know. So in Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, he talks about dark matter and dark energy. And these are things that people, even scientists, astrophysicists, they don't understand. They just ascribe a word to it and they say, one day we'll get there. One day we'll understand what this is all about and how this actually fits into the equation. For now, we just give it a name. Christians have a little bit more than that. We know that, yeah, we ascribe this word faith to something that we don't understand, but we know that God, who is good and gracious, has promised that those who believe in him, those who follow him in faith, will inherit eternal life alongside the church and with him, that we'll live forever with him. So how exactly does faith get us into heaven? I don't have the science for you. But I do know that there are things that exist in this world that we don't understand. And faith is one of those. Faith is the expression that a human gives in response to a God who has loved us. So it's not really faith that gets us into heaven at all. Faith isn't a work. It's God himself who bends down to us and says, you will be mine. And yes, faith is the human response. And that's the word that we use to describe the process of getting into heaven, the door, if you will. But God is always gracious, and God will always show mercy to whom he will show mercy. So look to him, trust in him, believe in him. And even if you lack words to describe things sometimes, or even if you're not sure if because you have doubted if now God will love you, or if now your faith is no longer good, just look to Christ and he will be your Savior. Well, that's it for today. A bit of a shorter session, but hopefully that's good for you. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your night. I'll see you next Thursday.